This episode's going to make you so wet.
Welcome to Namely 90s. Wow. The podcast that takes you back to the time before smartphones, Google, and Y2K. Join your hosts as they relive the pop culture that shaped a generation and the parts that many people wish they could forget. Listen in to the conversation about how the decade defined those who spent their childhood there and how it shaped them as adults. So, turn down the grunge and dial up the internet. Let's get started. It's time for Namely 90s.
That's right. You're listening to Namely 90s. My name's Andrew, and over there is Brandon.
That's me.
You can find us online at namely90s.com or on Twitter and Instagram at namely90s with a 90s. You can also find the show on YouTube every Monday at youtube.com/@namely90s. And if you'd like to support our show and get access to exclusive content, go to patreon.com/namely90s, 90s, and then we'll start creating said content once you sign up.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've checked our Patreon.
And also smash that subscribe button on whatever, whether it's YouTube or Deezer, if that's still a thing, or Good Pods, or Spotify, or Podify, or whatever.
Podbean, I think, is the latest one that we added.
Flick the Podbean. Isn't that from a movie? So it's Gerard Butler
porn.
and Katherine Heigl. Some sort of rom-com from like 2012.
Podcasters? Oh, Podbean was like the coffee place.
I'm going to look this up because now I'm 2009. I was pretty close. The Ugly Truth.
Katherine Heigl?
Katherine Heigl, Gerard Butler. There's a reference to flicking a bean, I think, as to some. Wait, we're going to move on from that. So, what's up?
Well, speaking of flicking the bean, I watched that 90s show today.
That's my response to that innuendo or euphemism, really.
Oh, so that 90s show came out today on Netflix. This is the day we're recording. It came out last week for people listening. That 90s show being the continuation of not that 80s show, but that 70s show.
Right. Naturally.
Yes. That's the progression. I watched like 3 or 4 episodes before we started recording, and I'm going to watch the whole series. Wow. And I say that because I'm fairly sure that it's not going to make it into a second season.
I think it works because they actually brought back like enough of the people.
They did, but it's also in like, you know how they do that 70s show is structured in such a way that you could bring on the famous people and then just have them walk away and never show up again.
Right.
Like they waste Topher Grace and Laura Prepon show up in the first episode. Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis show up in the first episode, but they don't get to interact with Topher Grace and Laura Prepon. And then Fez, Wilder Valderrama shows up, I think, as either the end of the second episode or the beginning of the third.
Does he show up as an NCIS agent?
No, Fez is now a hairstylist.
Okay.
And he's in love with the woman that lives next door to the Foremans. Basically what happens is they show up and for 4th of July with their daughter. Eric and Donna show up with their daughter, and then the daughter is naturally uncool because Eric's kid. Yeah, and right. Eric is now a professor in Chicago who teaches about the religion of Star Wars. Shocking. And his daughter is now a teenager and wants to get away from them for the summer and make friends and live life and whatever. And they're like, okay, fine. You can do that. And that's the premise. And then Kitty and Red are back to living with teenagers again. I don't know. It feels like it just kind of fit back into continuing that 70s show, which, okay, to be fair, it is like out of the 4 episodes, 2 of them are direct rips from like the first.
Why reinvent the wheel?
Yeah, that's how you do these nostalgia things now. The first episode is the exact copy of the original, except with slight tweaks.
Except instead of like sitting downstairs in a circle smoking pot, they're just like raging out of their minds because they're on like Molly and PCP or something.
Well, so I paused halfway through the episode I was watching, but they are going to a rave, so possibly. But at the end of the first episode, Kitty drops a bunch of old records and board games. And if you remember back to that 70s show, Eric, one of the places he hid his stash down in the basement was the Candyland board game. So they open the Candyland board game and they find 20-year-old Wii.
Yeah, I'm sure that's real potent. It's like the oregano that's been in the back of your spice cabinet since 2000, 2002,
7, but yeah, pretty much. They also ran into Leo at one point. Tommy Chong.
Okay.
His character, Leo, man, sweaty drunk, I'm not God, Oscar.
Wisconsin EDM, that's like its own genre, right?
Oh, yeah, especially in the 90s. But yeah, I was hesitant because the kids looked so young, but they're winning me over, and then the parent storylines each episode seems to be doing well so far.
Good.
Yeah, I'll keep watching that. And speaking of things I'll keep watching, there's a trailer this week or last week, depending on when you're listening to this, that dropped for the 30th anniversary reunion episode of Mighty Morphin Power Rangers called Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Once and Always. And I made Andrew watch the 2-minute and 30-second trailer that also dropping on Netflix. I was going to quit my Netflix subscription this year, but this might keep me around for another 6 months. It's coming out in April. They're reuniting 4 of the Mighty Morphin Rangers.
So would you renew it? Because isn't Cobra Kai on Netflix?
Yes, but they haven't announced another season yet, have they?
Yeah.
Have they?
6? Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I don't remember that.
Yeah.
Because I remember I was hoping they would, but I don't remember them doing it.
You're right. Sorry, my mistake. You're right.
But yeah, give us a 6th season of Cobra Kai.
Yeah, seriously.
And especially since you just found the show.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like that. It almost seems like it's completed, but you always want that little bonus.
Yeah, and it also could have been completed back in season 3.
True. They can always add more drama.
Yeah.
Anyway, Netflix is a steaming heap, but that 90s show.
It really is. That 90s show, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and then for the new season of Power Rangers, they just announced that the new Red Ranger is going to be the first full-time female Red Ranger without sharing the role of Red Ranger for the season. Which is a convoluted way of saying the first female Red Ranger, because there was another female Red Ranger in the Super Samurai.
Yeah, it feels like they're a little late to that party.
30 years late.
Isn't it time for the first non-binary Ranger at this point?
I think they have one.
Oh.
He might have been an alien.
Well, then I think it kind of defeats then you're just chickening out, I mean,
so this is the same cast in Ranger series that it was the first openly gay Ranger, openly lesbian Ranger. So they had to up the ante for the third
season. Played by Ellen DeGeneres. Wait, that was
yeah. They de-age her really well with the technology.
They basically reanimate her. Okay, sorry.
She's not dead. Yeah.
Ellen, wasn't she one of the most liked people on TV for a while, and then it became known that she was really actually not that nice.
Yeah. Right as it was her final season or something, and then it's everyone's just oh my god, working for her is a nightmare. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and both 90s relevant things on Netflix. So apparently this is where millennials have to turn to now for their entertainment, because you can't be watching Euphoria with all the teens and the party drugs and such.
Netflix knows their demographic, I guess.
Old people.
Children.
What?
No, there's kid shows on there. I don't know.
Yeah. That's fair. Yeah. Anything you're watching? Anything you're looking forward to?
We're finally. I mean, this is not 90s, but we're finally almost done with Modern Family.
Jesus.
But it's 11 seasons.
Yeah, but
and we don't have that much time to watch TV.
That's fair.
So we're finally getting through that, and then we're just trying to figure out what we're going to watch next. It's always the
well,
thing.
It has more than 11 seasons. Power Rangers.
Oh God, no, thank you. Yeah, what else? I mean, we always, as you know, we always have Friends on in the background, like at nighttime or whatever. Although it is very strange, and I've read somewhere, maybe on Reddit, that like the theme song is wrong on the Netflix version. Like, it's the right song. It's by the Rembrandts, but it's like a weird. The reason it's weird is because we watched that whole DVD box set for like for years, and it is the original like TV recording broadcast theme song.
Yeah,
but now it sounds different. There's all these theories as to why, like, it was sped up on TV to make the episodes a little shorter to fit.
It wasn't
commercials. It just sounds wrong, and it's very weird, and it's kind of off-putting. But other than that,
I mean, as someone that owned that song, that single on a cassette tape, the original broadcast version was the same as the recording.
Yeah.
So,
but yet something is weird with the
online. I haven't watched it. I remember it being correct when I watched it on Netflix. I haven't watched it on, what is it on now? Peacock?
HBO Max. But then I heard it. I was listening to my 90s playlist, and I heard the song "I'll Be There For You" by the Rembrandts, the radio edit. And it's just a different song. Like, it sounds similar, but it sounds so different.
I personally enjoy the bridge where they go into the...
No, but the radio edit they must have done a separate recording for the show because it sounds different.
I, again, disagree. You
have to listen to them side by side. It is definitely not the same. Like, it's not the same recording. It's interesting.
Maybe the
version I heard was from a different...
Yeah, I don't.
Too, but.
It wasn't the radio edit that I had. It was the single, the full song.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's hard to listen to that song because you can't not think of Friends. Like.
Didn't they make it for Friends?
I thought they made it. I'm not sure. They could have made it before.
I'm pretty sure they made it for Friends. That's why, like, the music video was them, like, playing the song with them.
Yeah, you're right. It was written for Friends. Well, good to know. I didn't know that. I learned something today.
So you can say the thing.
Well, right.
No, I meant today I learned.
Oh, no, I'm not going to say today I learned.
The other thing you hate.
I was today years old when oh God, just... Ugh.
All right. So we're doing our second deep dive episode. It's my turn to pick the topic. Yes, naturally I picked in the dead of winter. The topic I picked was Super Soakers, the original summer fun toy.
Well, deep dive got you thinking about water, so you're like, we're going to dive into...
It's not that I was trying to figure out a random quote for Quotely 90s and then picked the Water Boy and then thought I could do Super Soakers.
But you're reminding, in the dead of winter, well, it just pretty much became winter. A month ago, you're making us think about summer.
Yeah.
Now we hate you.
Well, to be fair, I was outside yesterday and it was sunny and blue and clear. I'm
going to fly to California and stab you, just so you know.
It was just very wet because it rained for 2 weeks here.
Put a tarp down.
Yeah, that's the one thing I don't have if a tree falls on my house.
Did you know tarp is short for tarpaulin?
I did not.
Yeah.
What is a tarpaulin?
It's a tarp. TARP is an abbreviation.
Yes, I that was a joke.
Okay.
That bodes
I'm surprised we didn't call it a Paul. Okay.
Well, Paul is like the thing that you hold.
Yeah, that you bear.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, there you go. So Paul Bearer, if you will.
Yes. I think it's like a pole or something, isn't it? And that's where the word pole comes from.
You're hanging on to that
and
pole.
That's your Namely 90s deep dive. Catch us next week for okay, so before we start, I used a variety of sources for this. You can find that all in the information below in the description. And I leaned a lot on I leaned a lot on isoaker.com. That's ISOAKER.com for the latter half of the story. And I used them the last time we talked about Super Soakers all the way back in episode 7, the June 1991 episode. And while there's a lot of interviews and articles about the creator of the Super Soakers, Lenny Johnson, there's not a lot of documentation about the decline of the Super Soaker. So shout out to isoaker.com. And if you want a more in-depth documentation of the Super Soaker brand from 1982 to 2016, check it out. And you can also check out their library of all the Super Soakers mentioned in this episode, so you can follow along, because I won't go into overly descriptive lists of every single model. Or right. Descriptions of every single Super Soaker, but what you can do is figure out what models you had and tag us on Instagram or Twitter at naming90s90s and tell us what Super Soaker, what water gun you had and what you personally remember, because I'll be bringing up a couple that we had, or if you've been listening to us since episode 7, you'll already know this. But yeah, I didn't really think of a good title. I feel like Andrew would have had a good title for this episode.
I absolutely would have called it Phil Pump and Blast. I mean, and you may recognize that, listeners, as a reference to that episode. You said it was the 7th episode?
7th episode, I believe. Where
one of the promotional slogans for one of the Super Soakers was Phil Pump and Blast, which Brandon and I had an awful lot of fun with. The slogan.
And so that means if you saw the title for this episode, you saw that it says Phil Pump and Blast, a Super Soaker retrospective.
Absolutely.
And it was only 17 minutes into the episode in which I decided to title it that. All right. So welcome to the Super Soaker. If you're not familiar with what the Super Soaker is, it is a water gun produced by Laramie in the entirety of the 90s. The term has become a generic term for a pressurized water gun, like Kleenex or Band-Aid has for those products.
All right.
It is more. Let's get a more Wikipedia clearly entry for this. It's an American brand of recreational water gun that uses manually pressurized air to shoot water with great power, range, and accuracy, so you could pump, fill, and blast. But I shouldn't have cut it off there. With greater power, range, and accuracy than a conventional squirt pistol. So yeah.
The thing about this is that when they say an American brand of recreational water guns, it implies that there's like a utilitarian water gun that you're like, people are like, the police force carries it, you know?
Yeah, that's what they have on top of their crims. Little riot tanks, right?
Maybe if they're hunting witches or something. I don't know.
Do they float?
It's a military water gun. It just like cuts people in half.
Oh, we'll get to that later. That's a teaser. So it sold over 1 million units, which I was going to take this actually out because it's sold way more than 1 million units. That's probably the original Super Soaker 50.
Sure.
And the brand's made over $1 billion, obviously. And we're going to have some quick terminology. We're going to talk about the piston pumper, which is the dumb kind of Andrew's enjoying this already.
All these words just make me giggle.
So a piston pumper is the kind of water gun where
you have to keep pumping it to keep it spraying.
Exactly. And yeah. I call it the dumb spray as you pump kind. Air pressurized, which is what air pressurized. That's what the Super Soaker does. There's two kinds. There's pressurized in the water reservoir and pressurized in a separate chamber. Water reservoir being where your water is stored. Versus this.
Is that why the ones had like the big tank and then like the little tank, the little spherical tank?
Correct.
Got it.
And then when we get further down the line, there's the constant pressure system, which is water pumped into a rubber bladder to exert a constant pressure on the water as it exits the chamber, so that you get the force and pressure leaving at the same time.
That's like me when I have 3 cups of coffee.
Yes. And then finally, there's motorized, which is another version of water guns. Prior to this, prior to the Super Soaker, used batteries to power a motor that powered an electric pump to shoot water if you were the rich kid, or you just had a piston pumper that shot flimsy amounts of water.
Yeah.
And it's also used in some later Nerf models. So, inventing the Super Soaker, we have Lonnie Johnson, an engineer who worked at JPL on NASA's Galileo mission, and he was also a captain in the Air Force. He originally thought of the concept in 1982 while he was working on a new type of heat pump for refrigerators and air conditioners that used water instead of Freon to be more environmentally friendly.
It'd be nice if that had worked out.
Right.
By the way, Lonnie Johnson sounds like a guy who drives an excavator. Just saying, like, his name does not sound as distinguished as his background.
Correct. This man has 120 plus patents to his name.
Do you know anyone named Lonnie? I know one person named Lonnie, actually. Is it short for something?
I assume Leonard.
Lonnie Wahlberg? No, that's Donnie.
But Lonnie, I feel like, was a popular name in the 80s and 90s, or the like 70s and 80s, so they would be adults during the 90s.
Means ready for battle. It's a gender neutral name of American. Okay, I'm so sorry to interrupt. Continue.
No, this is a quote from Johnson. So I was machining some nozzles and experimenting at home and shot some streams of water into the sink. And then I turned and shot across the bathroom where I was doing these experiments and thought to myself, geez, this would make a neat water gun.
Fair.
Other reports say that he had a leak in one of the systems, and that's where the pressurized stream idea came from.
Yeah. We had that in our basement at work the other day.
Oh, so you could have invented the Super Soaker. Well,
no, it was like someone's like, there's water dripping in the basement. And I was like, I'll go check it out. And so I go, and there's like this little, there's a wall of pipes, and there's like a metal white door that's closed. And I see water dripping from it. So I open the door, and like this tiny jet of water, hot, like piping hot water, is just shooting across the basement. Same concept.
Did you?
I then put my hand into the stream. Like this.
Did you patch it, or did you just like close the door back?
I kind of walked. I just closed. I literally closed the door and called. And I was like, okay, I think we need to call the plumber. But then I was told it was like to keep the water at a constant temperature for the eye wash station. And I'm like, this is scalding hot. This is not appropriate.
Well, that was clearly the water refrigeration that he was working on back in the 90s. I was like,
good
right?
God. We had our own little Super Soaker.
So eventually he made a prototype from PVC pipe, plexiglass, some O-rings, and an empty plastic soda bottle, and patented it in 1986. It was capable of shooting water, like the prototype was capable of shooting water up to 40 feet. And he simply titled the patent for the Squirt gun. Wow, I forgot about that term. Yeah, like
Squirt gun?
Yeah, even across all of my research.
Yeah, like you don't.
No one used the word squirt gun.
As kids, I feel like we did a little.
Yeah, I feel like that was synonymous with Super Soaker. Like no one said water gun. Go get your water gun. No, go get your squirt guns. Yes, apparently it is synonymous with something else now. As it says in the patent, the squirt gun includes a nozzle for ejecting water at high velocity, a pressurization pump for compressing air into the gun to pressurize water contained therein, and a triggered actuated flow control valve for shooting the gun by controlling flow of pressurized water through the nozzle. A battery-powered oscillator circuit and water flow-powered sound generator produce futuristic space ray gun sound effects when the gun is shooting.
That's kind of fun.
Yeah, he originally envisioned it being like the terrible EES Nerf Super Soakers or Hasbro Super Soakers.
I feel like that's taking it too far with the noises, you know?
Right, and you don't need electronics in squirt guns.
Well, yeah, water and electricity don't mix necessarily, but also the fact that he, you come up with the pressurization system, but you also have to have the nozzle. It's kind of like the end of the hose, you know, is like just shooting out water, but if you put your thumb over it, kind of closes that down pressure. And creates more pressure. So you got to combine the two. There was never a great like pressure management system before. Yeah,
it was just squirting some water. So unfortunately, he was told it would cost $200,000 to manufacture the first 1,000 units. Originally, he planned on manufacturing it himself and selling it himself. So over the next few years, he would try to sell his pressurized water guns to toy manufacturers. And while they were impressed by it, and he was never really given a chance due to the lack of his own business experience. This was one of his first commercial ventures.
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
And finally, in 1989, a new and upcoming brand called Laramie would buy the license to manufacture his pressurized water gun. But actually, in reality, Laramie was mostly known at the time for making knockoff toys. They'd copy what was popular on the market and then make a cheap knockoff and capture about 10% of that market.
I mean, that's smart. It's always like, listen, if I could do 10% as well as this, rich person or this company, I do pretty well for myself. And they just took that and made it a business model.
Yeah. Beanie bagels. So in 1990, they released the Power Drencher, which looked a lot like the Super Soaker 50, I believe. It sold well, but it didn't have any TV-based marketing. So in 1991, they rebranded the Power Drencher, which you can find ads for online. And most of them will lead you to the 1990 model of the Super Soaker.
I bet. Oh, wow. Yep. Turn on that safe search.
And they rebranded in 1991 as the Super Soaker with a string of TV commercials that sold over 2 million units in summer of 1991.
Did they ever use the song Under Pressure by David Bowie in the commercial?
I feel like that would be too much for a cheap Super Soaker song.
Okay.
But yeah, Andrew and I watched one beforehand, before starting this episode. Do you remember much about it?
Well, what struck me the most is how pixelated it was and the aspect ratio. But it was like I think it was kind of like a Blues Brothers knockoff kind of deal with the kids wearing suits. The suits, sunglasses, and whatever type of hat that's called.
I think those were actual fedoras.
Yeah.
Unless I was a Tripoli. I couldn't see that well. It was very pixelated. But they tried to go to Buffy's party. Buffy wouldn't let them into the pool party, so they jump the wall wearing suits and shoot them with Super Soakers.
There's a name you heard a lot in the 90s, Buffy.
Especially the early 90s. And this was, I think that was prior to the movie Buffy the Vampire Slayer coming out.
Is that a name? I guess it is.
Probably got more popular after the show came out, but yeah. So
wow. Buffy is a short form of Elizabeth. That's like the whole Richard Dick thing.
That makes sense. Elizabeth Summers.
I don't like that at all.
Slayer. So the original Super Soaker line included the SS-30, which was the small orange pistol. The Super Soaker 50, which was the yellow mid-sized one that had like the water bottle looking tube on the top, and the Super Soaker 100, which is the blue model with there's the second ball on the back tank, and a 1.5 liter reservoir. That's the one that I had. I always thought of that as my dad's Super Soaker. And the Super Soaker 200, which you saw in the end of the commercial, had the dual tanks on the top, or it looked like a dual tank, and a shoulder strap, and it was orange and yellow, and it was a 2 liter dual reservoir on the top, which
what's 2 liters in American?
2 liter
gallon, roughly.
It's not a lot. But for like water gun technology, that was mind blowing back then. Yeah. Right. So one iteration or the other of the Super Soaker was in the top 10 summer toys throughout the 90s, since the rebrand. Most of them were bangers.
It's got to be like, it's a water gun. You got to be in the top 10
and
for summer,
and a good one. Like, do you remember like you would get like a one that looked like an actual gun with an orange trigger, and it just like would squirt like maybe a foot
those
away
are terrible.
Or I think,
and the way you refill them, it's got that little plug that you pull out. It looks like one of the little tags you get on clothing, And
there's like no way for it to aspirate, so like keep overflowing. You couldn't fill it.
It's incredibly irritating. Whereas with the like the jug, the thing, the unscrewed thing, the reservoir, you could just like dunk that in water or fill it up fairly quickly
from the hose. Yeah. The only thing that I remember that kind of got close to that was like the dumb things where it was just like one long tube that you just like suck all the water.
Yeah, those were dumb.
Those were dumb. It would take so long to fill the chamber. Yes, very true.
And the soaking power on those was pretty good. I mean, those things were.
Those would hold a lot.
I mean, but I feel like those were always in the pool. They were ideal for like water sports and stuff.
True. Let's get back to some of the controversial Super Soakers. There are 2 that weren't bangers, according to online forums, and that was the Super Soaker XP85, which was the 3 nozzle split array that you had 2 of.
What the hell was the point of that thing?
Well, so you could shoot forward and left and right, just in case you get ambushed. And the XP90.
That's why they have that in Afghanistan, right?
Yes, it shoots 3 ways.
Yeah, are being ambushed, and then you just shoot every direction.
I mean, yeah. And so those were criticized for not packing the same punch as an average Super Soaker, which I kind of remember them not like doing spraying so well.
No,
or at least
it
as
was
hard. You own them more than I did, so because you actually own them. But the pinnacle came in the form of the CPS line, which is a constant pressure system, and in particular the CPS 2000, which was Lonnie Johnson's favorite, and the CPS 1000, which I owned. Those are considered.
They're so dangerous. Someone calls CPS if you buy one for your kids. That's where they got the name.
Kind of, yeah. But where the Super Soaker reached the highest of highs in water gun technology with the constant pressure system, it also set up its own downfall.
Dun, dun, dun. For a fact. And now let's go to Brandon for the Namely 90s Minute.
Welcome back to our mid-episode break, namely 90s Minute. Every week we look back at a culturally relevant show, movie, or piece of pop culture that probably helps stoke the algorithm. This week, in honor of Sarah Michelle Gellar helming the new supernatural teen drama series Wolfpack on Paramount+, we're looking back at the time she helmed one of the best supernatural drama series in the 90s, Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is an American supernatural drama that ran from 1997 to 2003 on the WB and UPN, starring Daphne from the Scooby-Doo movie as Buffy, the girl who stuck a foot up her at band camp in American Pie as Willow, Kevin Lynch from Criminal Minds as Xander, Kendall Casablancas from Veronica Mars as Cordelia, the Prime Minister from Little Britain as Giles, Booth from Bones as Angel, Chris from Family Guy as Oz, Brainiac 5 from Smallville as Spike, and Nona from The Adventures of Pete and Pete as Buffy's sister Dawn. The show is based off of the film The same name that we did a Namely 90s Minute on, continuing Buffy's story as she moves to a new town called Sunnydale, which happens to be on top of a hellmouth. She gets a new watcher named Giles to keep her training in her vampire slayer duties during her last 3 years of high school. She makes friends with some nerds, Willow and Xander, after being picked on by popular girl Cordelia Chase. Also, she falls in love with a tortured vampire with a soul angel who stalks her like he's Edward in Twilight. After drowning and being resuscitated in the season 1 finale, there are technically 2 slayers, and the second one gets killed, calling Faith, played by True Calling, who ends up being an evil slayer turned by the evil mayor, but eventually gets her redemption in the final season. After they destroy the high school in the season 3 finale / graduation, Angel spins off to Los Angeles and Buffy goes to college. She falls in love with newcomer Riley, who's a part of a super soldier program on campus, and he leaves after having an identity crisis. Willow falls in love with a witch named Tara and becomes a witch herself. Xander falls in love with a demon named Anya. Giles feels lost because Buffy doesn't need him anymore, so he opens a magic shop. Buffy gets stuck with a little sister in season 5, born from magic. Her mom dies in season 6 in the most real depiction of real life loss on television until This Is Us. Finally, in season 7, Buffy faces the first evil, who sends proto-vampires after her out of the Hellmouth. She collects all the potential slayers together and unlocks their slayer potential in the final fight against the first, and destroys all of Sunnydale in the process. After season 7, there are official comics that continued the story for another 5 seasons, which I read all of, and finally has been rebooted through Boom Comics in a modern interpretation of the TV series similar to their Power Rangers line. And that's Buffy the Vampire Slayer in a Namely 90s Minute. More or less.
Have you heard of That Cartoon Podcast? Join us while we deep dive on some artistic wonders and even a few blunders. In our second season, we take you through the shows that made all us 90 kids who we are. From Angry Beavers and Rocko's Modern Life to Samurai Jack and the Powerpuff Girls, we've got you covered. You can listen every other Friday on your favorite podcast app. Find us at That Cartoon Podcast.
And now back to the show.
Check out That Cartoon Podcast. Say hi to Teach, who we
GCP.
had on. Hopefully they come back from break, because couldn't help but notice that they haven't been posting their episodes this month like they said they were. One of them had a baby. That's
Part of the government shutdown, I think.
Yeah, no. One of them had, if you were listening to our 12 Days Christmas specials, Teej's co-host, and technically the producer of the show is their wife, not Teej's wife.
They are not married to her together, just to clarify.
Are they?
No.
What?
You said their wife.
Oh. Yeah, it's a
that does
husband, brother husband thing. No.
A throuple.
No, Teej's co-host and his co-host wife, I'm blanking on the name right now, had a baby. So hopefully,
Mazel tov.
And yeah, yes. So hopefully they get their episodes back up together after the shock of having a newborn comes to an end. Does it ever end, Andrew?
No.
Yeah, fair enough. Back to what did I call it? Fill, Pump, and Blast, a Super Soaker retrospective. The CPS, the constant pressure system, was a second revolution in water warfare. Second to the introduction.
This is water wafer.
It does say water wafer. Second to the introduction of the Super Soaker 50, but unlike the original Super Soakers, they could only be fired the original Super Soakers, I don't know if you knew this, but could only be fired horizontally.
The originals?
Yeah, the originals, because if you pointed them vertically, the air would shoot to the front of the chamber and the water would go to the bottom. So then it would just be a spray. So
why would you be shooting up in the air though?
Well, I don't know. I remember shooting the CPS 1000 up and upwards for no reason at all.
So you're saying the old ones could only be fired horizontally?
Correct. They had to be
because of the air, but the new ones you could fire any angle.
At any angle, which was pretty cool. I didn't realize that when we were kids, but definitely would have used that against you had I known. So as mentioned in our last block, the CPS had a rubber bladder chamber which allowed for firing in any direction and maintaining that pressure. Do you remember any squirt gun fights that we had as a kid?
Not really, but so what you're saying is when you pump it, instead of pressurizing air to push the water out, you're actually pressurizing the water in this bladder that has the capability of stretching to some degree, I imagine.
Yes.
And then that provides a more constant pressure without the loss of water. There's no air in that bladder.
Exactly. So it'll eject regardless of direction and maintain that pressure.
Got it. Leaving
the chamber, which results in more power, more impact. Oh God, I loved it as a kid. It was
I do distinctly remember that it was like very different than anything we'd ever seen before, you know?
It was awesome. Those came out in 1996. The CPS system was introduced in 1996 with the CPS 2000, and it hit its stride in 1998 with the release of the CPS 1000, which is kind of when I remember having it. And
you had the 2000, right?
I had the 1000.
Get a nostalgic picture. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So they released in 98 the CPS 1000 and the CPS 3000, which was the version that had the backpack.
Oh, that thing's sweet.
So the backpack would allow you to carry more water with you, which was the one downfall to any of the Super Soaker line, because they would have, I don't know, a couple liters at most.
I'd say the only downside to the CPS 1000 was that you couldn't take the tank off. You had to fill it from the top thing, but that's not the worst, I guess.
I agree. I think most of the CPS 2000 also had that feature, or didn't have the removable tanks. I don't know if any.
Yeah, you're correct. You're correct.
I don't know if any of the CPSs would. I think it's because of how.
No, you're right. It could be a limitation depending on how you chose to fill a tank.
Right. I would definitely have to use the hose instead of dunking it into a bucket of water.
You have like a bunch of the tanks on a belt that you wear. You just like flip off the lid, and it's like having a magazine holder.
Well, I mean, so like future products would have that functionality. There would be like, I've seen some water pistols with like magazines of water, which dumb because it's like less than a water bottle full of water. Or like there were ones that had like these water pellets, and which also came in magazines, which I guess made more sense, but still at the same time, you want the big chamber of water. You want the 3000. But yeah, so we reached the height of the Super Soaker in 1998. In 2000, they released the same lineup of the CPS under the Monster line, which kept the same chambers and general design, but outwardly made them more hideous to match the monster theme. And it was around this time that, according to some reports, that Laramie had to test the Monster XL, which was a reskinned CPS 2500. For safety, particularly how safe it was to shoot someone point blank in the eye with it. Yeah,
I think the issue becomes like when you start upping the game, like all of a sudden you have like a water RPG that like literally explodes, you know?
Yeah. Rocket propelled water grenades, you know? I was looking forward to that as a kid.
Next time, like, instead of water, let's use gasoline. Okay.
Yeah, or reports. That goes back to the release of the first Super Soaker. There are reports of people in doing drive-bys with it, and then actual people shooting back at like actual guns back at those people.
Or like, couldn't you like put cat piss in it or something gross to shoot at people? Yeah,
bleach was the one that came up in my research. I remember.
I would go to cat piss.
Yeah, well, people would put Super Soakers full of urine in comedy things.
What if you were like, you're in a restaurant and you're like, would you like some balsamic with that? And you get a giant Super Soaker out.
See, I feel that's what you have those like $5 squirt pistol things for.
They have oil and vinegar in it. You should have done that when you worked at that famous sandwich shop.
Oh, yes. I'm sure that would have been good.
With the pedophile spokesperson. What? Former spokesperson. There it is.
Yes. Former spokesperson, not former pedophile.
Correct.
I'm glad that's going to be in our transcript. So great SEO, Andrew.
You're welcome.
And then from this point, so it barely passed the test and became the upper bounds to how close you can get to doing to pressurizing a water gun without causing permanent lawsuit worthy damage to someone's eye at point blank range, which kind of just killed the whole line. From this point forward, they would release less and less CPS models until 2002. Or after 2002, there was a 3-year gap before another one came out, and that one sucked. Also in 2002, it's significant to the Super Soaker because this back in 1995, Laramie became the subsidiary. Thank you, of Hasbro, which allowed for better distribution for the squirt guns on a much larger scale, but kept the evolution of the product under Laramie's control for 5 years, and that was extended to 7 years. So in 2002, it was the last year Laramie had control over the Super Soaker line, and Hasbro disbanded the original team and absorbed the product into their own designer hell, I guess. This would result in no new CPS blasters aside from the Super Soaker Aquapack Devastator, which sucked because it didn't compare to the previous ones. And more gimmicky things like the EES series, which stood for electronically enhanced, which basically added flashing lights to the blaster with AA batteries.
Like, you're one of the biggest toy companies in the world, and you think just adding some flashing lights to it is going to work? That's dumber than a rock.
Are stupid.
Yeah, but I don't know.
That was sarcasm, by the way. Finally, in 2008, Hasbro didn't release any pressurized water guns under the Super Soaker line. Instead, they released piston-based pump systems and a spring-based pump system. And yeah.
Why do you think that is? Safety reasons, manufacturing costs?
I'm pretty sure they saw, because Laramie managed to get to the height of what you can do before lawsuit worthiness, and they even had some lawsuits based on those. Anyway, so they're definitely kind of scaling it back. I assume I'm gonna throw out Columbine.
I just miss the days when toys were dangerous, right? Now I sound like a boomer.
I know, right?
They don't say it like that, but that's exactly what they imply.
I mean, no, they do say it like that.
Back in my day, we played with a coffee can full of rusty nails.
Exactly.
We didn't get no tetanus shots.
But we grew up at the time where it was magical to have a squirt gun fight. Like, because
I feel like it's kind of a squirt gun no man's land these days. Have you
ever seen a child since we've become adults? Have you seen a child play with a squirt gun?
No, actually, I can't say that I have.
Yeah, or just driving around in the summer, you would that would be something that everyone
was having a squirt gun fight. Yeah, exactly.
Or water balloons,
or squirt guns laying in the front yard. You know,
exactly.
You just don't see that anymore.
You don't, and it just kept declining. In 2009, the 20th anniversary of the release of the Super Soaker, or the 1989 to 2009. Was the 20th anniversary, and they re-released the Super Soaker 50, but this time with a screw cap on top, which you complained about in the CPS 1000.
Just it limits your options. I was envisioning this reservoir belt that you could unload one and reload another.
Like a bandolier.
The problem is a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds. So I think you might always be pretty heavy after a while. Anyway.
But if you had multiple reservoirs for that original Super Soaker,
what I'm imagining is
do that.
All the reservoirs on your bandolier or whatever you call it, they have a flip top, like an easy flip top, and then you just screw it on real quick. You're just dropping, reservoirs left and right.
I see. That makes more sense. I was envisioning an actual screw cap.
Now, what if you had one of those, the rapid refill, for paintballing, where they have the thing where it's a jug with a nozzle and you open it. It's like the when they fuel up at the the F1 racers.
Yes. That would be cool. That we might get to that. 2009, they re-released Super Soaker 50, which sucked. Also in 2009, they absorbed Super Soaker into the Nerf line, becoming the Nerf Super Soaker. So now it's Nerf Super Soakers.
So what you're saying is they really nerfed the Super Soaker?
Yes, they really did.
They truly nerfed it.
I would like to point out for those listening that do frequent icesoaker.com, Andrew has not visited the site, so he doesn't know that that's the title of their Nerf chapter.
Oh, really?
They did the same joke. They nerfed the Super Soaker.
Yeah, I go to a different website for research on. Never mind.
Yeah, it's something Soaker, but not the same. And finally, for the 30th anniversary, Target had the Super Soaker 100s, which is what we talked about.
Yes, episode 7 of Namely 90s.
And I almost bought one because they did return to the screw reservoir, I think.
But the problem is, we've learned this on this show. Anything they try to revive, it's just such a half-ass attempt.
These ones did better than the 20th anniversary ones, though.
But like, have you ever even had 3D Doritos? People making 3D Doritos?
Sure.
No, you haven't.
Sure.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So while the true Super Soaker spirit is dead, for those of us who grew up with them in the 90s, it truly lives on in our hearts. The Super Soaker was inducted into the Toy Hall of Fame in 2015. In 2010, Hasbro sued Busby Toys for the hydropower line of water guns due to their use of a rubber bladder system similar to that of the CPS, which is disappointing because that means Hasbro/Nerf is sitting on the constant pressure system, not releasing good water guns for fear of getting sued, but also preventing other companies from making what they're afraid to make.
What if they incorporate more technology? Okay, stick with me here for a minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
there's a third bladder.
No, well, no, it comes from your bladder. No, you know how they have the Roombas, the little robot vacuums?
Yeah.
Well, they've released a Roomba that's smart enough to detect pet feces and not run over them. And I can attest to the fact that when they run over pet feces, it's a bad deal. So a CPS gun that can detect a human face too close and won't squirt.
I think so. I think that's why they were re-releasing the Super Soaker line, but not the CPS lines, because if you did try to point into someone's eye, you would just spray them with mist with the Super Soakers.
No, but I'm just saying, like, what if the CPS guns could detect that there was a face too close? We're living in the 21st century.
But that would still require like a D battery.
Yeah, well, it's all about the D batteries with toys.
With squirting. But you are making the point that I was about to make. Current water gun makers have to innovate to make a mark on the market now. Like, for example, there's something called Spyra 2 water gun. It's an electronic water gun that shoots water bullets up to 46 feet. It reloads in 12 seconds. You just dunk it into the reservoir. Does it automatically, and the blaster lasts for 2,000 blasts. Spyra 2 water gun.
Oh, yeah. I think I've seen a commercial for that. That's why I was trying to look it up and then stop my recording. Yeah, these are pretty cool, actually.
They're also like $150.
I mean, listen, inflation.
True. And, adults that wouldn't point blank into someone's eye. And then there's also Buncho Balloons Zuru Slingshot, which is a bow and arrow-esque water balloon launcher that could reach 1,000 or 100 feet. Those are the best I could find. And honestly, it's kind of reminding me of what I looked up options back in episode 7, and I think they were the same ones. So hopefully the lack of classic Super Soakers with the pressure system or the Pinnacle CPS system will cause innovation for future water guns, allowing future generations to enjoy the water gun fights we had as children. That was one of the highlights of the summer from my childhood. And having one of the biggest and best blasters in hindsight has both made me long for Super Soakers of the past while being burdened with the hands-on knowledge of knowing how puny and ineffective the modern Nerf Super Soaker line is. So, yeah.
I mean, for me, here's what I would say. In our society, kids already need body armor. So why not just make a mask or helmet that prevents the water from going in their eyes?
True. I assume there is, right? Or just
yeah.
goggles?
Well, I mean, just like probably the airsoft ones, probably work.
Or, like
Wait a second.
goggles.
Hold on now. So you can buy an airsoft gun,
Mhm.
or honestly a Nerf gun. I think could put an eye out, but the Super Soaker is the one that got basically, destroyed by this whole safety conscious aspect of things.
Pretty much. I mean that. I would speculate that. No, I pretty much think that is what it was. It's unless for some reason water guns just didn't appeal to kids afterwards.
Maybe not these days. Kids these days
have actual guns.
Yeah, well, that is true. Unfortunately,
indeed. Any final thoughts on Pump, Fill, and Blast?
Oh, no, you've got it all wrong. It's Fill, Pump, and Blast.
Fill, Pump, and Blast, a Super Soaker retrospective.
No, definitely miss the days of the squirt gun fight.
Same.
I feel like we lived on some sort of our neighborhood was from like the 1950s.
It kind of did feel like
riding bikes around, in the cul-de-sac,
You'd
playing
have
ball
wars against the other cul-de-sacs. Xenophobia.
Oh, yeah, that was the best. A little child-sized xenophobia for your enjoyment, parents.
Gotta protect the cul-de-sac with water guns. We have the right to water bear water arms. And that's it for this week's edition of Namely 90s. This week's deep dive edition of Namely 90s. Remember, you can find new episodes out every Monday. Join us next week for another variety show episode. And find us on Twitter and Instagram at Namely 90s with 90s, or find our personal accounts at bschwitty and at Namely Andrew, and tell us what you want us to talk about on future deep dive episodes. Remember to tag us with which Super Soakers you had when you were a kid. If you'd like to support the show, please check out our Patreon at patreon.com/Namely90s, also with 90s, and maybe we will too. Finally, you can also contact us through our website, Namely90s.com. Please subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Audible, CPS, Deezer, TuneIn, iHeartGoodPods, and wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm Brandon, that's Andrew, and we'll catch you next time.
Golden showers.